Hey everybody, Ben Frederickson here alongside Jeff Gordon. We're kind of wrapping up this Cardinals baseball season here at stltoday.com. We'll have the offseason, of course, covered, but kind of trying to put a bow on a pretty ugly present, Gordo. And I got one question for you, actually two questions today. One, was this your easiest regular season grade card to hand out? You do it every year at stltoday.com. And I imagine this one had to be the fastest and the easiest to do. You just broke out the F stamp and you just stamped it again and again and again and again, right? I mean, you probably did it in your sleep this year.
Well, that's how it's going to look for the management team because, starting with that, I mean, owner, general manager, the front office in its entirety, the manager and the field staff in its entirety. At the end of the day, the season was a complete failure. And so I gave all those guys a D- with an opening to maybe do something better in the second half when I did my midseason grades. But at the end of the day, the season was a failure. So you're starting from that standpoint. The people who ran the team, who guided the team, they all know what the standard is. They all address that. They all admit they fell well short. And there's nothing more you can say about a team that finished, last in the division. Worst year in more than 30 years. So, that part was easy. You start parsing individual players. There were just a lot of D's on the pitching side, for sure. There was some redeeming value with almost everybody. Not everybody, but almost everybody. And then the offensive side.
Yes, no one just took their stuff and left and went home and said enough with this.
Yeah, I mean,
no one absconded to Puerto Rico for a basketball excursion this year.
No,
that's a plus.
No, so it was it was tough. And then on hitting, the hitting side was more of a mixed bag. Pitching side was pretty gloomy, as you would expect, because they're just trying to find positives. Fred, especially on the pitching side, was the hard part.
I think I can make a case, Gordo, that Wilson Contreras is my team MVP for this season for a few reasons. One, he winds up putting as good or if not better numbers up offensively than he did when he was an all-star in Chicago last season, when the Cardinals kind of started thinking, well, maybe they could add offense to the catching equation and live with some of the defensive things Wilson Contreras didn't do. Two, he played most of the season with tire marks on his back from being thrown under the blame bus and was probably their strongest player down the second half. If you like, some people don't, if you like the baseball reference version of WAR and how it measures catchers, some people prefer other metrics, but if you like the baseball reference version, he tied Paul Goldschmidt for the team lead and wins above replacement this season in his first season after replacing a player I think is a first ballot Hall of Famer in Yadier Molina because of how he overcame adversity and kind of didn't fold when the team was oftentimes blaming him unfairly for some of their struggles. I think Wilson Contreras is my team MVP, taking into context the season. Do you have one? And is it Wilson? If not, who jumped out to you as maybe the best performance on a team that is not going to be remembered for many good ones?
Well, I tend to grade on a scale. So a performance versus expectations. The only other guy that to really jumped out as a big positive was Jordan Walker. I know there was a lot of buzz about him, but he's a rookie, 21 years old. He did have to go back to the minors, but boy, his progress during the course of the year, his maturation, his improvement in the outfield, and there's just a pretty steady production. A little more pop at the end of the season, but on a team full of guys that either plateaued or regressed. A guy like Lars Nootbaar had an okay season, but he just sort of plateaued. His power numbers weren't where he wanted them to be. The other guy, until he got hurt, of course, Brendan Donovan got the highest grade offensively, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to play in the field, and then he shut down with the elbow injury. He had, improvements with launch angle and exit velocity, and he got a little more damage done. So that was about it. Walker's progression, Donovan before he got hurt, and then Contreras, he was the one clutch hitter on this team. Fred, when you go and look at what guys did with men in the scoring position, some pretty sad numbers.
Yeah, regression too, and you point this out from Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. Is that a blip or is that a trend? We're going to keep that. I'm sure that'll be coming up this offseason. We talk about where this team goes from here. Great stuff on the grades, Gordo. You can find them at stltoday.com. We kind of rolled them out in waves, and I'm sure the front office and manager and owner grades will want to be getting a lot of attention here shortly at stltoday.com. Keep it locked there for all your Cardinals coverage this offseason and postseason coverage as well. For Jeff Gordon, I'm Ben Frederickson. We'll talk to you next time.